I want to read to you a couple of things from the Oath Keeper brochure about the principles that we swear as Oath Keepers to defend. Some of these may sound familiar to you. All men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. Does this sound familiar?
Yeah.
And this comes straight from the Declaration of Independence. And as a former North Carolina high school teacher, I can tell you there are kids graduating from high school today who've never heard this. They've never heard it. I was fascinated at the number of kids that I had that, these were seniors getting ready to graduate, and I'd ask them one very simple question, just to see if they actually learned something while they were in high school. And I'd ask them, what causes the tide? And they're like, huh? You know, ocean in, ocean out. 90% of them didn't catch it. They had no idea what caused the tide. Now think about that for a minute. That should have been about a 4th grade question. Our schools are desperately failing. A lot of that is because parents are not involved. And some of that's because we're not involved. There should be Oath Keeper groups going to local high schools, going to local junior highs, asking, can we give a presentation on the Declaration of Independence? Can we give a statement on what it means to us as former members of military or police departments or anyone else who's sworn the oath, what it means to stand for this country? I certainly hope you consider doing that. Our next speaker is Gadi Adelman. Born in the United States, he moved to Israel when he was still at a very young age. 1 month after his 14th birthday, after attending a rally in Jerusalem on November 13th, 1975, a terrorist bomb was detonated in one of the main shopping centers. Several people were killed and 45 were injured. Gadi and his friends were only a few yards away and survived the blast. Now, after 35 years, Gadi has taught and lectured at various high schools, colleges, and taught to law enforcement agencies the dangers of terrorism in America. How many of you think that there's going to be actual terrorism in America? Franklin Graham, not too long ago, made a statement, and I'll paraphrase. He said, if the churches in America are not getting ready for persecution, they're in deep trouble. I believe that. I certainly believe that. Gadi now is on his own weekly radio show, American Akhbar. Where's he at? How'd you get that name, bud? I know, America's great. And this can be heard on Radio Jihad Network on Blog Talk Radio on the internet each Thursday night at 8 p.m. And please welcome Gadi Adelman. Get up here. You need a crutch? An elevator?
Just took the wind out of my sails. How we doing, everybody?
Fine.
I really wish this crowd was bigger. This is way too important to have the amount of people we have here. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out today. I just wish we had about 4,000 more. I'm going to go at this from a little bit different way than everybody else up here has done. As Rick just mentioned, I have a radio show and I teach and I lecture, and I'm used to having a PowerPoint presentation behind me and I work off the top of my head. I'm not used to doing speeches, and also forgive me for my voice because I'm fighting a cold. So I know I sound like Peter Brady, but for those that remember that. What I do when I go out and I teach a class or I lecture, or I give a speech, and even on my radio show, I try and educate, because just listening to a bunch of speakers, if you walk away with nothing, it's just preaching to the choir. Everyone here agrees with everything that's being said today. And the difference is we need to walk away with what are we going to do about it. And I hope to talk a little bit, like what Rick was just saying, about what we can do about it. And I'm going to move this out of my face. I have an advantage that most people don't have. Because when I left the United States, I was barely a teenager. When I came back at the age of 21 after serving in the Israeli Defense Forces, I saw a change in my country that had happened to me overnight. Because I remembered it one way when I left, and it was totally different when I came back. And I said to myself when I came back to the United States, what in the heck happened to my country? The people that I had been friends with before I left for Israel, I looked them up and we got together. All my former friends, all they were interested in was partying and getting high. The country had totally changed. It wasn't the America I remembered when I had left. When I left this country, the popular TV shows were, speaking of Peter Brady, The Brady Bunch, Little House on the Prairie, Wonder Woman, The $6 Million Man, Hawaii Five-0, Adam 12, SWAT, The Rockford Files, and one of my personal favorites, I used to watch reruns of The Rifleman. Do we notice a theme in what we used to watch as kids? What's popular on TV today? That'll tell us how America changed. Right now, what's popular is The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, Real Housewives of whatever city they happen to be in, RuPaul's Drag Race, and Kourtney and Kim Kardashian Take Miami. That's what we've become as a country. I walked out watching the Brady Bunch and I came back to the Kardashians. When I left this country, there were flags, American flags, outside of every school. Elementary school, middle schools, high schools. There were flags in every classroom. And every morning we said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Today, you don't even see flags inside of every classroom. I know the school my daughter goes to, they don't have flags in every classroom. Most of them don't even say the Pledge of Allegiance anymore. And now we even have universities that are banning the American flag on campus altogether. Is it any wonder that we are where we are when they won't even put a flag up and then they make a rule in a university that you can't fly it? I remember last year there were a couple of kids that wore American flag t-shirts in California on Cinco de Mayo. And those two children were told to turn their shirts inside out or go home, because it was offensive to the Hispanic students. I think there's a flag over there, and the last time I checked, we were in the United States of America. You can't wear a t-shirt with the American flag? This is where we have gone as a country. I say we've allowed it to get there. When I left this country, in school, we learned American history. We learned about the Founding Fathers, the Revolution, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence. Today, in school, kids are learning that America should apologize. We should be ashamed of what we as a country have done throughout the world. History is being rewritten to appease those same apologists. And along with it being rewritten, a lot of it is not only mistruths, but out-and-out lies. Is it any wonder that we even have to have a gathering like this, when this is what our children are being taught? Boys and girls' rooms, and I'm talking about restrooms, have become optional. You can go wherever you feel comfortable. Oh, you feel like a little girl today? Go to the little girl's room. And it sounds funny, but it's the truth. That happened just in Charlotte, in this state. Gender equality. We're raising our young boys not to be men anymore. How many of them are going to want to take an oath? We have a president right now that uses the Constitution at his own will when it suits him. Is it any wonder that our kids don't appreciate, understand, or know the Constitution? The current administration, right now, the Obama administration, is making a deal with the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, while those same very people are screaming in their streets, "Death to America." Think about that. We're sitting at a table making a deal to allow them to get nuclear weapons while they're screaming, "Death to the United States."
And to Israel.
Israel's going to be first. You're absolutely right. I keep bringing up our kids as an example because that is how we got here. That is the reason we have to have groups like the Oath Keepers, and that is the reason that we even have to have gatherings like this. Here's the education, and this is what Rick just talked about. Do you really know what your child is learning in school? Do you really know what's being taught? I talked about on my radio show last year that children in the same county where Fayetteville, North Carolina is, that's the home of Fort Bragg, while their mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters are overseas fighting for this country, were being taught from a school textbook that Allah is God. In North Carolina, at Fort Bragg, that's what our students are learning. Oh, it talks about Jesus. Here you go. You're going to have a Jew for a second talking about Jesus. In that same textbook, it said there were many that believed Jesus was the Messiah. And in the next paragraph, it said, Allah is God. Do we need to read between the lines? Do we think that that doesn't enter children's minds? I have no problem with Christianity. I have no problem with Judaism. I definitely have an issue with Islam. I don't want my kids learning that. And if you want to teach religion in schools, teach it correctly. Let's not rewrite history. The Muslims were not woven into the fabric of the United States. The only Muslims that were ever in this country, when this country became what it is today, were here because they were slaves, and most of them ended up here as slaves by other Muslims who are still today in the slave trade. Our children are not learning the truth, and it is up to us as the parents of this upcoming generation to get involved. I always say at every lecture and on my show to think globally, act locally. We're not going to fix the world by sitting here, but we sure as heck can fix our own communities. We can fix our own school systems. We can fix the way our children are learning and being raised. And that is how we got here. That is why I saw a transformation when I came back to the United States. It didn't happen overnight. It happened throughout years and years and years, and now you have those liberal hippies from the 1960s teaching our kids. And the only way we're going to change that, and the only way we're going to have kids that appreciate this country, is to get involved and know what's going on in the schools. And if you live in this community, you do it here. Don't worry about next door. Except you tell your neighbors and your family members that live in other cities and other states to get involved locally. And if we think globally, but we act locally, we can turn it around. Everybody here today, and I want to thank everybody for their service, everybody here today talked about having taken the oath. I've taken the oath twice. Once was in Hebrew. I served in the United States Navy because when I came back from Israel, had really short hair, didn't know what else to do with myself, joined the Navy. But I've taken that oath twice, and Rick had asked me, so I'm gonna do this real quick. Rick, where are you?
I'm back here.
All right, well, get up here where I can see you. Short enough as it is, I can't see over that thing. Rick had wanted me to talk about the Israeli Defense Forces Oath of Allegiance. And it's interesting how different yet how similar it is to the United States oath. So I want to read to everybody the oath that we take in Israel, and obviously I'm going to read this in English. I translated it. No problem. I swear and commit to maintain allegiance to the State of Israel, its laws, and its authorities, to accept upon myself unconditionally the discipline of the Israel Defense Forces, to obey instructions given by authorized commanders, and to devote all my energies and even sacrifice my life for the protection of the homeland and the liberty of Israel. That is not much different than our oath. And really, if you read it and you study it and you look at it and you compare it, the only part is the sacrifice of my life. But every single individual that takes the oath of office in this country, in the military, understands that it can come down to that. We're not that different. There's a reason the United States and Israel are allies, even though our current administration is trying to change that. Thank God. Thank God for evangelicals, and thank God for the Christians in this country who stand up for Israel's right to exist. And I say that from the bottom of my heart. If it weren't for the Christians of this nation, the United States, I don't think Israel would be there right now. Most Jews are bleeding heart liberals that agree and unfortunately vote for the likes of Obama. Don't ask me why. I've answered that question too many times. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out today. Please get involved. And if you're too old where your kids are out of school, get involved with your grandchildren. We can change and bring this country back to the way it was, to the country I remember when I left the first time. I don't want my daughter to grow up in the type of country that we are obviously headed to if we don't do something about it. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. You wouldn't be sitting here. Get involved. Get others to get involved. That's the only way we're going to take it back. Thank you.
All right, I'm supposed to give another shameless plug. We've got 2 raffles on this end down here. There's a really nice little rifle they're going to give away, and a pistol that, I'm going to have to go buy some more tickets for that one. We also have the t-shirts, license plates, coffee cups, flags. I'd like to see almost everybody here take a flag and have that flying in their yard in the next week or two. I bet you'd probably hit the news. What do you think?